ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's your boy Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Also, if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap that notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Also, hit that like button because not only will it ensure that you get more recommendations of my videos, but also ensure that YouTube recommends this video to more people just like yourself. With that said, let's get into the video. We're going to be talking about X Factor number 2, written by Mark Russell, with art by Bob Quinn, colors by Jesus Abertov, and letters by Joe Caramagna. This issue is basically a tug of war between Havok and Polaris. Polaris seeing Havok as being fully bought in to the whole X Factor government-run mutant strike teams and things of that nature, something that is dangerously familiar to both of them, considering that they both served on not the original incarnation of X Factor, but the second incarnation when it was basically the same thing. X Factor was a government-sanctioned op. And now, Polaris, she is, for the most part, I think it's fair to say this, Polaris, since the Krakoan era, has been radicalized. She no longer has that same sympathy for humanity that she may have had before, and she is way more pro-mutant now than she probably ever has been, for the most part, at least in a, Earth 616 timeline. And it's to the point where she's trying to get Havok to see, to reason, that this X Factor thing ain't it. It creates some very interesting conversations, some interesting dialogue between the two. The back and forth that Polaris and Havok have this issue, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable in some spots because, for the most part, you know where Havok is coming from, but you also know that Havok is hoping for the best when the best is not possible. He's hoping that this whole X Factor thing is going to work out because, as far as he sees it, he thinks that he can do better and create more change from the inside as opposed to being outside the system. He thinks that he can, with his hand, guide the direction that X Factor goes, especially now that he's team leader in the wake of Angel being laid up in a hospital bed, which, once again, I find incredibly funny because last I checked, Angel has a healing factor. He should not be out of commission for so long unless that explosion was just that baller. I have a lot of questions about that. I feel like there's probably something that Havok is not being told, and not just outside of the typical shady government stuff. I feel like there's something else happening here. But point of the matter is, Polaris is a part of the Mutant Underground, and this is going to create issues for Havok because, well, for one, his bosses at X Factor know this. They know that she is with the Mutant Underground, and while they don't directly suspect her of being the one who is leaking information, the types of information that basically led Darkstar and her X-Term team being prepared for an attack by X Factor, but someone is leaking the information. And it's starting to become one of those whodunit situations, and they kind of try and pin the tail on Polaris as, maybe she is the one, but it almost immediately starts to look like it's not her at all. And while Havok is the only person we know who have had any prior conversations with Darkstar, in terms of up into that first encounter with X Factor and X-Term, one could make an argument that maybe Havok might have told him something, but he wasn't inside the system yet, so it probably wasn't him. It's somebody else. You look at the current roster team and all roads kind of point in weird directions. I could make a case for almost anyone involved. You could make a strong case for Polaris being the type of Law and Order SVU red herring who actually turns out to not be a red herring at all. The fact that she is literally dating the leader of X Factor and also is a part of a mutant resistance that is diametrically opposed to what he does, yes, it would be really easy to use her as a bait and switch, to say, oh, hey, look at her, Cherchez La Femme, it's gotta be the woman, it's her, and then be like, actually, no, it's not her, she's not using her relationship with Havok, she's not manipulating him anyway. But you could also just as quickly turn that shit around and be like, oh, nope, it's totally her after all. But I think that would be silly. Honestly, think that would be silly. I don't think it should be Polaris. You could also make a case that, oh yeah, maybe, well, Havok, there's some conversations he's clearly having off panel that we don't know about. He was already talking to Darkstar, so clearly maybe he knows. Once again, as I said earlier, he wasn't inside the system yet, so it wouldn't make sense for him to actually know anything that would be useful to Darkstar. But you could also make some weird case that, oh, maybe he wasn't then, but he is now, which I think would also be silly. I don't think it should be Angel either. Angel, I feel like he doesn't need that. We've already tried the evil Angel angle before, and while I think it worked beautifully in Uncanny X-Force, I don't want to see it again. Not like in this particular moment. Zyber is honestly probably the one who's the most obvious of the obvious and will probably end up being the one. He's the new character. He's the one who actually survived and got away scot-free, no injuries really to speak of. And he also seems to be a little shaky. Though he's also exhibiting what is like survivor guilt, maybe even a little PTSD. That could just all be a mask for his guilt at being a traitor. And yeah, I mean, he was the one who was the most bought in at first. And now look at him. He almost doesn't seem like he wants to be involved at all. Once again, you can make an easy case that yeah, he just got shaken. This is his first mission. And of course he would be shaken at this situation. You could also make the case that that's the guilt talking. And I don't think that it's Broderick in this. I think he has actually too much to lose in this situation in order to be ginning up this sort of stuff. I like to often believe in the saying that every accusation is a confession. I don't know. I'm looking at the general and I have a lot of questions because for one, she doesn't seem to be anti-mutant. She doesn't seem to hate mutants on any major level. She actually seems quite sympathetic to them in a lot of ways. And she also doesn't seem very interested in losing any more mutants, though one could make the case that that is because she is trying to run a mutant government op. But at the same time, if that's the case, mutants under normal circumstances would be disposable to somebody who is running that type of an operation for the government where mutants are just bodies to be used as weapons of mass destruction deployed at a moment's notice whenever they see fit. So yeah, I'm starting to think, and also going back to the first issue, the bonus page where we saw that she was hiding something. There's something that's hidden behind a wall that she's keeping under lock and key. And part of me is starting to think, just based on like kind of thinking back on some of the solicits and things we've seen for future X titles, I'm actually starting to wonder if it's the Sentinels that are behind that wall, because we know that the Sentinel program is about to kick off again, only instead of giant hulking behemoths made out of metal and steel with lasers shooting out of their hands, it's actually going to be humans who have been transformed into cybernetic organisms. Their whole mission is to basically protect the fragile peace between humans and mutants right now. I don't know. I have questions. I have a lot of questions here. Is this connected to that? Does this one thing mean the other? I don't know, but it is definitely something that's fun to kind of think about. But at the end of the day, I do like the inclusion of the Mutant Underground, because at first it kind of seems like more of a militant group, and it kind of slick is, but one that the Mutant Underground to me kind of felt like a nod towards the Black Panther Party. A group of people who, well, yes, do they have guns? Do they have people in militant garb? Sure. But their goal is to protect their own. They're not trying to go out and actively harm the people who oppress them, but they're just trying to actively protect themselves. That's what the Mutant Underground feels like. And we saw the t-shirts from the first issue. We see it in this one. Polaris is wearing the shirt, the Jovius shirt. We learned that Jovius this issue was one of the people who was a former leader of the Mutant Underground. We get an introduction to a character by the name of Bruin, who is now seemingly the leader of the Mutant Underground, which they just want to look out for their own, and they want to be treated fairly, and they're willing to protest and march and fight for it, but not fight in the way that the X-Men do. At least the leadership doesn't seem that way. And like I said, that's just what it feels like to me. Havok actually is taken to the Mutant Underground by Polaris in this issue, and it's kind of where everything kind of devolves, and we see that there's potentially going to be a rift drawn between Havok and Polaris as a direct result of the fact that Havok feels like Polaris was trying to stage an intervention for him to get him out, to get him to spy on X Factor, and we learn in this issue that that's not the case. That's not what she was trying to do. She was trying to get him to leave X Factor, not stay. So that kind of goes back to earlier when I was talking about why I think it's actually more likely Polaris is not the one. She's not the spy. And even Bruin says as much. He doesn't want Havok to spy on X Factor for him. He wants to convince Havok to leave because he would rather have Havok as an ally to the mutant underground than some sneaky mole for them. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. This whole thing's gonna be interesting, and I feel like it's just, as it goes, we're gonna see that, yeah, there's gonna be some players who we're just not going to suspect. We're gonna get pointed in a lot of different directions. It's gonna be very easy to pick and point the finger at a lot of these different characters. For me, personally, I actually hope that it's no one actually on the team. I would actually prefer if it was Broderick and the General, who are just trying to misdirect. I don't think it's Pyro. Pyro is so simple these days. I feel like Pyro is such a simple person. Like, he just wants to have fun. I don't think it would be him. I don't think it should be him. I like Pyro as, you know, what he has become. I like how far he has come as a character. I will definitely say, I know some people will probably get a little in their feelings about how Havok dismisses him as being the second in command to him, which I think is, look, let's be real. Havok is not wrong. Pyro is the worst choice for second in command, though I do feel like maybe he will make a case for himself as this book goes on. Secondly, I will say I'm actually shocked Frenzy wasn't chosen, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in here in just a sec. But yeah, for third, I think is because Havok probably feels the way he feels about Pyro because he's only really known him as a bad guy. Over the course of the Krakoan era, they had, I don't think, any interaction with one another. Havok was always sequestered away with the rest of the Hellions during that time frame, and what time he wasn't, he was dead or undead and hanging out with the Dark X-Men, which Pyro was nowhere within a stone's throw of. And we also have the taken into consideration that Pyro was always on the Marauder during the early parts of the Krakoan era. It wasn't like they had time to talk. And it's not to say that mutants don't hang out in between the pages and in between the issues and panels, but for the most part, there was no evidence that Havok and Pyro had any interaction with one another during that entire stretch. I mean, it's safe to say a lot of mutants didn't interact with one another during that stretch. So yeah, it's safe to say that it's a good reason why Havok feels the way he feels. That said, I do think it's shocking, as once again, Frenzy wasn't chosen as second in command considering her leadership acumen. But if there is one character I do think that's on X Factor that could potentially be the spy, Frenzy would not be the worst choice. I wouldn't want her to be a spy because it would just imply some shadiness, but Frenzy is a freedom fighter above all else, and I'm pretty sure she sees exactly what's going on no differently than Polaris or Havok do. So yeah, I mean, she would make some sense. Dr. Cecilia Reyes, well, you know, they kind of, you have a moment where she bemoans being dumped and being single and, you know, using this as an opportunity to kind of rebound herself. I don't want to see her as like a traitor either, though in this case, being a traitor wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world considering what X Factor actually is. So, I mean, maybe Dr. Cecilia Reyes could be the one. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, that's something else we have to think about. Whoever the traitor is, they're not someone who is probably a bad person. It's, for all intents and purposes, someone who just doesn't like what the government is doing, using mutants to their own benefit. I mean, let's be real. X Factor is not a good thing. Fun book, but the team itself and why it exists is not a good thing. That's something I think we kind of have to like put ourselves in the mindset of. Whoever's a traitor, it doesn't make them a bad person. It just means they're being shady, but they're being shady for a good cause. Also, there's Granny Smite. I know I'm not gonna really dive too deeply into Granny Smite because I actually did a video talking about this woman before X Factor 1 even came out, so you can go check it out up here. But we see more of what I was talking about, the fact that she can't die. She walks to a pool, tries to drown herself, does not die. She comes right back to life. And you know, who knows? I could easily see her as being a traitor in all this because she doesn't seem to want to live anymore. And if someone is not that attached to living, they probably wouldn't care what happens to the other people around them. So the main idea of this video is that you can really look at everybody here. I don't think anyone really is above suspicion. Let's just be honest with ourselves. I don't think anyone really here is above suspicion. I think anyone could be the traitor for the most part, except for characters I think just don't make any sense to do so. And I think that's by design. I think that's not a bad way to do things. I think that what Mark Russell is doing here is pretty smart, keeping you looking in all the different directions. Just even the notion of even alluding that there's a traitor is already more than enough. We're just gonna have to wait and see what happens, and I'm looking forward to it. But in the meantime, if you want to check out what's going on over on the Jed MacKay adjectiveless X-Men side of things, check out this video right here. I talk all about it, and you can learn maybe a little teensy weensy bit about what's going on with some old mutant villains that have recently reared their ugly little heads. And until next time, make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, keep it plus ultra until then by clicking that like button, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.